Thanks to all my classmates and co-editors and mentors and supporters who helped make this possible. It was in February 2009 when I envisioned this book. There were things happening for me as an active duty SWO in southern Afghanistan, in Kandahar. I was working for General Mick Nicholson. I was doing really cool things. I was a SWO, sand sailor now, supporting my country. I said, maybe I should write a book. Really? Compared to Ben Wagner? Really? Compared to Jay Consalvi? Jay Consalvi, an F-18 pilot who saved a Stryker battalion. Megan Varley, the last female F-14 pilot to fly over Iraq. Or my VBSS colleagues, Jason Jackson. So the stories in this book were exceptional. And I knew that my role as class president of 2002, I could connect these stories, connect the dots, bring the personalities together to weave together a book that could define this decade through a leadership lens. So I called Carol Anderson. Carol Anderson lost her son Richard in a helicopter accident, training in Fallon. I called her on the phone, as I did all the mothers who wrote for the book who had lost their sons, and I said, Carol, my name is Lieutenant Josh Welly at the time, and I'd like to talk to you about Richard. Are you selling T-shirts? No, ma'am, I'm from the Naval Academy class of 2002. I'm on the board of trustees, ma'am, and I have an important project I'd like to talk to you about. This is not about sweatshirts. I don't want to talk to the Naval Academy. And she was actually torn at the time. She was suffering about her son's loss, and she hadn't been reached out to by the Academy family, and we could do better. I said, ma'am, we're writing a book to honor Richard. Our classmates, over 100 will submit, 33 will make the cut, and we'd like to hear your voice. Do it for Richard. Do it for those who've served. A few weeks ago, after we sold out our first printing of the Naval Institute Press, I received an email from her. My name is Carol Anderson, and I received my copy of In the Shadow of Greatness late yesterday afternoon, and just finished reading it. I was up much of the night and couldn't put it down. In the acknowledgments section, it talks about those leaders in the class of 2002 who advocated the project when others were skeptics. I was a skeptic. I wasn't sure how the book would turn out. I wrote the book more for myself than for Richard because I needed to heal. I also wondered how good it would actually be. Recently, when an email came out for me about the release date and asking me to spread the word, I did as my duty. I emailed all that I knew and told them about the book, but I said, although it was called a must-read by Tom Brokaw, I hadn't read it myself and couldn't endorse it. I had no idea what was to come. I do now, and look forward to reading the other stories, the courage not just in battle, but the next step, the perseverance, the triumphs through your academy days and beyond, and the failures that make us stronger. She and I worked for 2 years on her story. It is gripping, and it'll make you emotional when you think about how a mother answers that door when they find out they've lost their son. When I called Rocky Cheka to write, a Navy football player, linebacker type, he wasn't sure how he was going to find his voice either. But since we were classmates and company mates, I said, Rocky, you were a casualty evacuation pilot. You saved over 150 Marines, soldiers, Iraqis in 3 deployments. You honor Jen Harris, another Academy grad who was killed. You honor Ronnie Winchester when you write this story. Let's find your voice. We wrote this book to give a podium to people who are too humble to speak about service, who do their job day in and day out nobly and don't have a bestseller and don't go out into the New York Times and write their stories. They're too proud and too prideful. So I cajoled Rocky. As I had this vision of weaving these stories together, I knew what I wanted. I wanted universal principles. I wanted battlefield bullets, feeling the pressure of combat, and they're in this book. But I also wanted those universal attributes of partnership and diplomacy that we saw from 9/11 to now 2012. Here's something from Rocky's story. I experienced several close calls while flying during my first deployment in Iraq. We received multiple RPG attacks, small arms fire, and while flying our final approach, on departure for the mass casualty call from Combat Outpost Ramadi. The first RPG was shot directly in front of us and on final approach passed 10 to 15 feet above the rotors. Another was fired from behind us on departure and passed the left side of the aircraft. RPGs and small arm fires were shot at our aircraft numerous times, and on several occasions the aircraft took damage. I distinctly remember evacuating a Navy SEAL on my second deployment in 2006, the very same zone in Ramadi. He was the first SEAL killed in action in Iraq. One of his fellow SEALs came with him on the flight, and when we picked him up, he had a severe gunshot wound to the head and face, but was alive during the transit. He succumbed to his injuries after we dropped him off, and it became quite clear early on that no one was invincible here, not even a SEAL. I'm very proud of Rocky's story and the other 32 stories in this book. There are 16 SEALs who graduated from the Naval Academy, class of 2002. We provide officers into a diverse skill sets through our Navy and Marine Corps. How many SEALs do you think wrote for our book? Zero. One was my roommate, Nick Huber, who served in SEAL Team 1 and then went on to civilian world. He was my best friend. I knew he could talk to the other SEALs. I knew he said, he could find these great stories that people would run to the store and they'd buy the book. Not one of the 16 did. After 3 years of saying they could write anonymously, of saying they could write with a pseudonym, of saying I would write for them if they didn't have the prose, there was too much integrity for the silent service. So as we climb the ranks, approaching No Easy Day, a book that maybe doesn't follow all the rules or embrace what we're embracing, we hope you buy our book too. We hope you realize that ours is a no easy decade, a story of leadership and lessons from a diverse group of missionaries and things that you can take from the war zone to the boardroom. I want to talk to you about our title, In the Shadow of Greatness. And I want to talk to you about the great people who endorsed this book. As you notice, we have David Gergen on the cover. He is a leader at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and we are pleased as a former naval officer that he would support our book, and his 1,000-word foreword will just knock your socks off. We have General Allen, the senior leader of our joint mission in Afghanistan. Admiral Locklear, the senior naval officer for all of the Pacific region and Asia. We also have Admiral Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, whose son is a classmate, John, and his other son graduated from the Naval Academy in 2003 and is leading sailors today. He wrote because of his connection to the cause. This nonprofit book, this humble book that is good for the country. And then Mr. Brokaw. For 9 months, I emailed his assistant. I tried really hard. And I was pushed and pushed, but I don't quit. And in the final weeks, he submitted his blurb that has changed this book. I have some bad news. There is more security around Tom Brokaw than Admiral Mullen. So are we the next greatest generation? As the lead author of this project, I would say we are prepared for greatness. We served in unique ways. We bled and lost classmates and shipmates and subordinates and seniors on the battlefield. You see that in this book. And when you go deploy for your country in that way, it changes the way you want to serve at home. So how did the World War II generation do it? They paid the ultimate sacrifice. They came home and were the engine of progress for this nation for the latter part of a century. We, the 2.5 million veterans who are coming home in the years to come, are prepared for good things, for great things, to lead our country in uniform and out, and you will see 4 of those great stories in the latter part of our book. And in closing, the greatest generation of the 20th century lived through the Great Depression and fought a 2-front war. Our generation was called to defeat a faceless enemy and return to a country in economic turmoil. We aspire to be the next greatest generation, showing humility and respect for those who came before us. If we are to emerge in the shadow of our grandparents, we must persist in virtuous leadership. On every battlefield and in every boardroom, from Baghdad to Washington and from Kabul to Silicon Valley, our commitment is resolute. Our nation's best days lie ahead. Thank you. I mentioned before, I'm the class president of USNA 2002, so I help plan tailgaters and I do some